It looks like it's so nice of the people to have a special day for me.
St. Pat's.
So we all wear
It
green.
was very accommodating.
It's so nice. Everybody all over Chicago, they make the river turn green.
Green, that's right.
All in honor of St. Patrick. Well, we'll talk about that. Still cold, man. The East Coast is gripped in another snowstorm. It's ugly. Snow, ice, sleet, the whole thing. Whew, where's Al Gore when we need him? Well, anyhow, you ask yourself also about this Malaysian jetliner. Who pushed that thing off course and why? And those are the questions investigators are now asking, as they're certain the plane's disappearance was not an accident.
Authorities are now looking into the background of the pilots as the search effort keeps getting bigger and bigger. Ephraim Graham has the story.
At least 26 countries are now searching for the missing Malaysia Airlines jet, with America using its most sophisticated submarine hunter to scour the southern Indian Ocean, about 1,000 miles off Australia's coast.
One thing we do know, this was not an accident. It was an intentional, deliberate act to bring down this airplane. And the question is who is behind that?
And the glare of suspicion is now fixed on the pilots because it appears no one on board had the skills to perform the sophisticated maneuvering that marked the plane's midnight run, including a pre-programmed hard left turn. The data transmission system was also turned off and the location transmission cut. And experts say there's only one goal in intentionally shutting off those systems, and that's making it very difficult to find you. Police have now searched the homes of the 53-year-old pilot, Zahari Ahmad Shah, and co-pilot, Farik Abdul Hamid. In the captain's home, they discovered a homemade simulator. Investigators are examining it to see if it could have been used to plan the maneuvers the plane took before it disappeared. There's also questions about the pilot's political beliefs. He was a strong supporter of Malaysia's opposition leader, who was jailed the very day of the flight. Ephraim Graham, CBN News.
Well, it's a mystery, and our CBN News terrorism analyst Eric Stackelbeck is with us now. Eric, the Malaysian investigation is looking into those pilots. What do we know about them?
Pat, very interesting. First of all, I think it's pretty outrageous. I have to say that it took the Malaysian government, I don't know, about a week to search these pilots' homes and start investigating them, the crew, and the passengers. After about 24 hours, Pat, after this plane was missing, you kind of start looking at the pilots, and obviously it was something out of the ordinary. You're going to look inside the cockpit where the pilots are. Here's what we know about them. The main pilot of this flight, Pat, a 53-year-old Mr. Shah, basically the main nugget here is he had a flight simulator in his home. Now, that's nothing out of the ordinary, Pat, in and of itself. The guy is apparently a big flight buff. But look, what was he using the simulator for? We don't know. The other thing is he is apparently a political fanatic who strongly, obsessively, according to some, supported Malaysia's opposition leader. We're also hearing that his wife and kids left him recently before this flight disappeared. A lot of factors there. And the co-pilot, Pat, young guy, 27 years old. The main thing about him that we know that's not very savory is that back in 2011, he let some people in the cockpit with him, just some passengers from Australia, apparently. So both of them, there is some question marks. But, Pat, again, this is all speculation. We really don't know what happened yet. What we do know is this was foul play. It's either the pilots, a pilot, or a hijacker. Really no other alternatives here right now.
Has Al-Qaeda made any efforts against Malaysian Airlines before?
Not against Malaysian Airlines in specific, Pat, that we know of. But here's what we do know about Al-Qaeda activity in Southeast Asia. Back in 1995, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, he is the 9/11 mastermind. He came up with a plot called Bojinka. That's what's become known by the intelligence community. And what that was is Al-Qaeda was going to hijack 11 airliners in Southeast Asia. Now, one of them may have been a Malaysian airliner, but 11 airliners in Southeast Asia. So there's a precedent here, Pat. Also, in Malaysia itself, some of the 9/11 hijackers passed through that country. And in 2000, in Kuala Lumpur, which is the Malaysian capital, Al-Qaeda had a summit where they were planning new spectacular attacks. So if you're a jihadist with bad intent, you can find a support network on the ground in Malaysia.
Obviously, they disconnected the voice recorder. They disconnected the transponders. They disconnected any other type of tracking mechanism. Where did the blessed thing go? Did they just take it out and crash it? That doesn't look very spectacular.
Yeah, you know, a lot of questions here. Did they land it, Pat? I was talking to some folks this weekend who said, yeah, they could land it, because my early question was, how could they evade radar? But according to some folks I talked to who are in the aviation industry, they say, yeah, there was a chance they could have landed it. Now, there's two possible trajectories here, one southward into the Indian Ocean and one northwards more into around where western China is, and Pakistan and Kazakhstan. We don't know where it went yet. It may have went down in the ocean, the Indian Ocean, Pat. They may have run out of fuel. We don't know. Or the worst case scenario, God forbid, is they landed this thing someplace and they have nefarious plans for the future to use it in a terror attack, fill it with explosives, God forbid.
Well, that didn't account for those poor passengers who are on board. But Eric, keep looking at it. Thank you very much. You know, ladies and gentlemen, we wanted to show you something else. On this program, we've got a feature about the vulnerability of our power grid. They say if the 9/11 attackers had hit a nexus of power transformers, they could have done infinitely worse damage than they did in knocking down the World Trade Centers. Well, we'll talk about that. But also in the news, the crisis in Crimea is far from over as Russian forces continue to take control of more Ukrainian territory. And that comes as the Crimeans themselves voted to break away from Ukraine and become part of Russia. George Thomas brings us that story.
With the Crimean Peninsula now under their full control, Russian forces backed by multiple helicopter gunships captured another Ukrainian town this weekend that holds a natural gas facility.
They say they are protecting us from terrorist acts, but they don't explain which terrorist acts exactly.
Russia has deployed 60,000 troops along Ukraine's border as the government in Kiev worries about a full-scale invasion.
We are deeply concerned about reports of Russian military units moving closer.
Pro-Russian separatists say Crimea is just the beginning in their quest to create a greater Russia. Hours after residents voted to overwhelmingly break away from Ukraine and join Russia, Crimea's deputy prime minister said he'll give Russian troops safe passage to the eastern part of the country, where he predicts Russia will go next. To understand the conflict in Crimea, you have to look at the makeup of this region. More than 60% of Crimeans identify themselves as ethnic Russian.
We came back home to Mother Russia. We came home. Russia is our home.
While the majority of ethnic Russians voted for secession, ethnic Ukrainians and Muslim Tatars boycotted the vote. The West, including the United States, dismissed the poll as a sham and promised more sanctions against Russia. This morning, Russian flags flew over every corner of the Crimean capital as the parliament here declared the region an independent state. Russia is expected to formally announce annexation later this week. George Thomas, CBN News.
Isn't it amazing? We have a president, we have a Secretary of State who are totally impotent, as Mr. Putin just does whatever he pleases.
The movie Son of God stayed in the top 10 at the box office in its third weekend in theaters, finishing number 7 with more than $5 million. It's now earned nearly $51 million since its release. While Superbook is gaining more ground internationally, more than 17,000 children in French-speaking Africa are now members of Superbook clubs. Each club includes a time of prayer and songs, followed by a Superbook episode and lesson where children learn about the Word of God. So far, more than 2,000 children have prayed to accept Jesus. CBN's goal for this region is to have more than 400 clubs in 21 countries, reaching more than 50,000 children with a gospel message. To date, there are 85 clubs throughout 8 different French-speaking African countries. Well, to learn more about what CBN is doing around the world, go to cbn.com/international.